Well, for lots of reasons, it's great to be back here with the geospatial community. Every year, this community does more and more things that we're only talking about when I left NGA in 2006. I think the U.S. GIS has really taken off, and I want to salute the board of directors and President with Jeff Harris and Keith Mosbach and his team, and actually having had something to do with the early origins of the foundation, I'm just very proud. So thanks very much for the opportunity to say a few words again. This is my 11th GEOINT symposium, going back to the first one in 2003. And I typically open by talking about the ways the geospatial intelligence community is leading intelligence, and how you feel like family to me, and I recite my lines about how great it is to get away from Washington. So this year, I'll reiterate, the geospatial intelligence family is leading intelligence. Silent joke there, okay. But being at GEOINT does really feel like attending a homecoming or a family reunion. And I appreciate being surrounded by people who actually know the difference between a map and a chart, who can discuss the intricacies of the visible and invisible spectrum of light, and who know what activity-based intelligence means, and who get excited at the possibility that one day they'll have the capability to sit and stare at a single spot for hours on end. When I was a kid, that was punishment. I love being here, and it's great to see how our little symposium from 2003 has all grown up. So I want to talk a bit this morning about the symposium, about GEOINT as a discipline, about NGA, and about intelligence integration, and what the IC's work on transparency initiatives, and how NGA and GEOINT professionals are leading that. But before I jump into any of that, I thought I'd share with you something about something that recently happened to me. It's kind of personal and a little painful, but I'll share it nonetheless. A couple months ago, I got a jury summons from Fairfax County, Virginia, asking me to do my civic duty. So I brought it in to my staff, and they answered the summons by calling the county courthouse. And they finally got a hold of an actual person, a very sweet lady in the county clerk's office. And my assistant laid out the situation. She told the lady with the clerk's office that I was a Senate-confirmed presidential cabinet-level official who would have to drag my security detail into court with me. She said I'm responsible for our national intelligence budget of, well, $50 billion and going south. And for integrating the efforts of our nation's 17 intelligence agencies and elements. And she said I'm the president's senior intelligence advisor and personally brief him on intelligence matters several times a week. In other words, I was busy. So this lady thought about it for a moment, but she wasn't having any of that. She said none of that sounded like legitimate reasons for skipping jury duty. But she noted that I had just celebrated my 74th birthday in March. And she said that many older people have a hard time sitting through jury duty. So Fairfax County has an automatic exemption for anyone over the age of 70. And so she asked my assistant, Stephanie Sherline, would you like to use the over 70 exemption? Now, I would like to think that she paused at least a little bit before saying, yes, we'll take the geezer exemption. So, accordingly, since I've been around a long time, I guess I do need to correct something that as loath as I am to do this, something that Robert Cordillo said Tuesday in his speech, that I was weightlifting buddies with Socrates. Actually, that's not true. Socrates didn't lift, he was into cardio. And the reason I know that is because I saw him in the locker room all the time. So with that all cleared up, let me talk a little bit about the evolution of the GEOINT Symposium. I became director of NEMA 2 days after 9/11. and helped in a small way to usher in what was a lot more than a name change to NGA in November of 2003. And if I remember right, we held the 2003 and 2004 symposia in New Orleans. And then in August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, so we had to move GEOINT to San Antonio. The next year, 2006, is the only year I didn't have a speaking role in the GEOINT symposium. Maybe my invitation got lost in the mail. Probably had nothing to do with getting canned as NGA director. I'm kidding, it had everything to do with that. I'm sure I was radioactive at the time. But reflecting on that experience, I've got two pieces of career advice for all the young intelligence officers out there. And of course, by definition, all of you are young to me. First, always do what's right and speak truth to power, even if it's not going to be popular. And second, don't give up if things don't quite go your way. So after my premature departure from NGA and a short break, I was fortunate enough to serve over 3 years as Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And this August will mark 5 years as DNI. And I can tell you, it feels like it. And I plan to be around as DNI for another 82 weeks, 571 days, but who's counting? Anyway, we started the symposium in 2003. In 2004, the National Geospatial Intelligence Foundation took over, and it has grown into what it is today. Our nation's largest gathering of intelligence professionals, a terrific celebration of geospatial intelligence, and a great opportunity to exchange tradecraft and promote intelligence integration, which is my thing. Both within the practice of GEOINT, with the government and industry, with partners both foreign and domestic, and a manifestation of that foreign dimension we just saw with Stu Peach's Lifetime Award. So I want to thank the Foundation for bringing together government, industry, academics, our allies, state and local officials, and many others involved in national security during this week. A huge thank you as well to all the corporate participants, for sure, without whom this event simply wouldn't happen. I think the corporate support and the attendance here, the number of exhibitors, is a great testament to the value of this symposium and the value that industry attaches to it. And while I'm doing shout outs, I want to recognize Sue Gordon, now NGA's Deputy Director. Among her other great accomplishments, she's largely responsible for designing and implementing In-Q-Tel. And that's a legacy that continues to pay dividends for the IC and will for decades to come. She's also a bit of a trailblazer with off-ramping and on-ramping her career. She left the IC for 7 years to focus on her kids, came back without missing a beat to reach ever-increasing levels of responsibility in the intelligence community. So Sue has, I think, an inspirational history as a mom and as a senior leader in the IC. And of course, also need to more seriously recognize Robert. I like to think of him as a protege, just as I consider Tish Long as a protege. Now, Robert, of course, as many of you know, has followed a unique path to become NGA director, starting out as a GS7 imagery analyst in 1983. So he was into GEOINT before it was cool, and he was into GEOINT before we called it GEOINT. And so it's nice to have a GEOINT hipster in the director's chair at NGA. Last summer, Robert came back to NGA after 4 years at ODNI, and he was the deputy director for intelligence integration and the primary briefer to the president. And seeing the great integration work happening in NGA, I know Robert has brought his experience as the DD&I to bear. So Robert, wherever you are out there, thank you. So while I'm on the subject of NGA stealing my top talent, I need to give another shout out to Peter Heinem. Just last week, we announced that Peter is leaving his post as IARPA director to take the helm at NGA's Innovision. Peter was IARPA's first office director for incisive analysis in 2009, And in 2012, he took the reins as IARPA director, succeeding Lisa Porter. He's maintained a very high standard for research in both positions. And during his time at IARPA, we signed more than 70 agreements with IC agencies to transition technologies into operations. And he'll be a great fit and a great leader for Innovision. So congratulations to Peter and to NGA. For those out there considering a joint duty tour, forgive the commercial, please look at Peter and Robert as terrific examples of how a stop by OD&I can lead your career to get bigger and better things. In April, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the launch of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and the highlight of that week was a visit from the President. He took the time to speak to our workforce as well as to the assembled IC leadership. And really, when he spoke, he was speaking to the entire community when he said the IC's work is vital for him to make good decisions. And he simply could not do his job without our insights and analysis. Then he took the opportunity to critique my work as his principal intelligence advisor. So hang on, I think we'll play a clip of that discourse.
I am here to help mark the 10th anniversary of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and I'm here for a simple reason. Jim asked me to come. You see, as you might say with the IC, Jim is one of my best human sources. He's well-placed. His reporting is known to be reliable. So I accepted his invitation with a high degree of confidence. I want to thank you, Jim, and your entire team, and leaders from across the IC, for all of you taking the time to welcoming me here today. I'm not going to give a long speech, but I do have three basic messages that I wanted to convey. The first is that I don't know how astute a consumer of information I am, but I can tell you I sure do rely on it. And those who come and brief me every single morning do an extraordinary job. I will say that the only flaw generally in what's called the PDB that I receive is that when Jim provides it, some of you may have heard, he leaves paper clips all over my office. They're in the couch, they're on the floor, you know, he's shuffling paper. And so because I knew I was coming over here, one of the things I did was return them all. And so this will be available to you. DNI's budget's always a little tight. We can start recycling these. That's going to be critical.
So the story on the paper, yes, thank you. Story on the paper clips, and actually it's kind of NGA that sort of led to this, because a lot of times we'll bring in maps, imagery, and that sort of thing to amplify our briefing, and when Robert was doing, and now Mike Dempsey. And so when I go in there, I'd clip the, if I had an amplifying chart or imagery or a map or something, something graphic, and many times that's produced by NGA. And so I would keep them together, particularly if I had 2 or 3 sets that I had to distribute to not only the president, the vice president, and the other overlights. And invariably, I would drop the paper clips, as the president alluded. So one day, I did my thing, and I was about to walk out the door, and the president stopped me and very ostentatiously got out of his seat and picked up 2 paper clips that I dropped on the floor and very ceremoniously presented me with the paper clips. So that's the background of that story there. Anyway, that jar I have on my desk, and I haven't taken one paper clip out of it. It's always good for your boss to give you constructive feedback. He didn't just crack, though, the prop comedy jokes at my expense with his speech in April. And he did have some, I think, serious things to say. His theme for the speech, something he said several times, and a message he asked me to pass on to the entire IC was this, and I quote, "You can take pride in your service." So I'm here today to pass that message on, to reinforce, underline what he said to the geospatial intelligence community. You can take pride in your service. GEOINT is a tremendous force for good in our world, with positive impacts felt way beyond the dimensions of the intelligence mission. Earlier, I remarked on how Hurricane Katrina forced us to move GEOINT 2005 from New Orleans to San Antonio. And I spent some time recently looking back at our IC response to Katrina. And I realized how much of a watershed moment that was for the IC, and particularly for NGA, when I was director a decade ago. In the aftermath of the hurricane, Admiral Van Allen, then Commandant of the Coast Guard, reached out to NGA for help in figuring out what precisely the storm had done to New Orleans, to the state of Louisiana, and the state of Mississippi, and just how it had decimated so much property, and how it rerouted the waterways and blocked ports. In general, helping him with situational awareness in order to manage the response to this disaster. So the Coast Guard and NGA ended up working very closely together, and in the process, I got to know Thad Allen pretty well. And I consider him now both a close personal friend and a personal hero. And I do appreciate a personal shout out from him, I guess, yesterday. So a few months ago, my wife Sue and I had dinner with Thad and his wife Pam, and as old war horses are wont to do, we found that among the few, we were reminiscing, and among the few mementos that Thad and Pam display is a topographical, three-dimensional map of New Orleans given to him by NGA when he retired. He recalled the superb work NGA did after Hurricane Rita and Katrina, as well as in the aftermath of the BP oil spill. That was all work that mattered, that made a difference here to our citizens in this country directly. And as a consequence, people on the ground remember it. Immediately after Katrina, the cooperation between NGA and the Coast Guard saved lives and set the city and region on the path to recovery. So NGA made a tangible difference in the daily lives of Americans in that region. So I want to tell everyone here who is involved with Katrina recovery operations, as the President said, you can take pride in your service, and I know I do yet today. I spoke at the Coast Guard Foundation dinner a couple of weeks ago, and more we're trying to do that, talking to non-IC audiences about the IC. My dad was in the SIGINT business in World War II, and I grew up on intel sites and antenna farms all over the world as a consequence of traveling around with him. So for me, this kind of transparency that we're now engaged in is kind of genetically antithetical. But that's been one of the major takeaways for me from the last 3 years. Yes, we have to protect our secrets, our sources, and methods. But we have to be more transparent about the things we can talk about, and there's more we can talk about. And so we're trying to live up to that. It's why we as a community have declassified more than 5,000 pages of documents on our Tumblr site, IC on the Record. This past December, our site was highlighted by Tumblr as one of their few big in 2014 sites. And 2 years ago, I didn't know what a Tumblr was. We stood up what we call IC Transparency Working Group with members from 17 IC elements, working to transform the IC's principles of transparency, which we've published, into action. And this January, we issued a comprehensive report answering the challenges the President publicly gave to us in January of 2014. We've also supported the USA Freedom Act, which has been enacted, and which authorizes increased aggregate reporting of how the IC exercises some of its authorities. To be sure, we have to protect our tradecraft and our sources and methods of collecting intelligence, but we're working as a community to show that we're worthy of America's trust and that we are worthwhile. So that's another reason why you can take pride in your service. And in our increasingly transparent world of intelligence work, GEOINT has a distinct advantage. It is the most naturally transparent of all the intelligence disciplines. We've been able to talk publicly about GEOINT because of NGA's support to disaster relief, to the Sochi Olympics, to Super Bowls, and many other key events. NGA also had a huge and somewhat unsung impact on the control and containment of Ebola in West Africa, providing open data on human geography to the countries and NGOs that were involved, and for the first time ever, setting up a publicly available website for disaster support. And the NGA and the IC put the lessons we learned with Ebola into action after the Nepal earthquake, producing damage assessments, reporting on the operating status of airfields, providing estimates on internally displaced people, displaying studies of transportation routes. NGA saved lives and set a community, at this time on the other side of the world, on the road to recovery. And that's another instance of just how you can take great pride in your service. For those in industry, I'm talking to you as well. Whether you provide support to the govies or military intelligence officers or provide commercial imagery, you too can take great pride in your service to the country. Commercial imagery is increasingly important in what we do. NGA, with Robert at the helm, is taking transparency to the next level with ideas like the GEOINT Pathfinder Initiative to align with a more open source philosophy by attempting to answer difficult intelligence questions with unclassified commercial data. Because it's unclassified, we can broadly share commercial imagery, whether we're making a public diplomacy case against Russia for obfuscating what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, or helping West Africa coordinate their Ebola response. And we, as an IC, rely far more on commercial imagery than we did when I became director of NEMA. And that brings me to a concern, though, I'll share with you here today, which is I don't want to see commercial imagery with NGA as its champion competing with our NTM capabilities with the NRO as their champion. NRO is responsible for developing our NTM architecture and needs to play a leading responsible role in designing future GEOINT architectures that are truly an integration of the NTM systems that we must build and the commercial systems that we must leverage. That's a challenging task because of the rapidly evolving threat environment and the equally dynamic commercial GEOINT market. But it'll be important for the future of our own IC capabilities. I know NGA and the GEOINT community are good at looking out to future capabilities because I've watched the leadership this community has taken, for example, with eyesight, the IC IT enterprise, including NGA's push to develop the GEOINT services platform to reside on eyesight. I first publicly mentioned the idea of integrating the IC's IT enterprise at GEOINT in October of 2011. So I'm happy to come back to GEOINT this year to announce that I think eyesight's real. It's taken us a couple of years or so to really lay the foundation, and over the last year we've been in an adoption mode. We've built physical foundations. We have the common desktops rolling out, 28,000 by last count, with more to come, hopefully 50,000 by the end of this year. We have a working government cloud and a commercial cloud, and we have hundreds of millions of records in the cloud from the big 6 agencies and others. We built policy foundations for sharing between agencies and particularly with second-party integration. We built budget and procurement foundations with licenses and common services. We built security foundations for tagging data and tagging people. And we have the IC Security Coordination Center watching over our cyber defenses. So I think that's tangible progress. It's not to say we don't have more to do, we do. And a lot of people in this room are responsible for that progress, for getting the foundations in place for a more efficient, more secure, and more integrated intelligence community. So I personally want to say thanks, and again, to repeat the message, you can take great pride in your service. Because of your work, we're more effective with our IC missions now. And if we're discussing mission effectiveness, the best feedback is from our customers. And I can personally attest that the President, as he indicated here, knows what GEOINT does for him. He truly appreciates the work that the IC does for him and the positive impact we have on national security. But you don't have to take my word for it. I got one more clip from that his April commentary. So we can all hear intelligence customers number one's thoughts on who we are and how we're doing. Clip, please.
The one thing I know about people in the IC is they don't seek the limelight. That means sometimes that the world doesn't always see your successes, the threats that you prevent, or the terrorist attacks you thwart, or the lives that you save. But I don't want you or folks across the intelligence community to ever forget the difference that you make every day. Because of you, we've had the intelligence to take out al-Qaeda leaders, including Osama bin Laden. Because of you, we've had the intelligence quickly that showed Syria had used chemical weapons and then had the ability to monitor its removal. Because of you, we had the intelligence, despite Russia's obfuscations, to tell the world the truth about the downing of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 over Ukraine. Because of you, we had the intelligence support that helped enable our recent nuclear framework with Iran, and you're going to be critical to our efforts to forge a comprehensive deal to prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. So you help keep us safe, but you also help protect our freedoms by doing it the right way. And the American people and people around the world may never know the full extent of your success. There may be those outside who question or challenge what we do, and we welcome those questions and those challenges because that makes us better. It can be frustrating sometimes, but that's part of the function of our democracy. But I know what you do. We're more secure because of your service. We're more secure because of your patriotism and your professionalism. And I'm grateful for that. And the American people are grateful as well to you and your families who sacrifice alongside you.
So that's the impact your work has on those critical missions that the President mentioned. And every day with missions we can't talk about publicly. So I want to close with a phrase he used throughout that speech: you can take great pride in your service. Personally, I couldn't be prouder of our intelligence community and of this, and most especially of the geospatial intelligence community. So thank you for all of you, for your service and for what you accomplish for our nation every day. Thanks very much.